Hello everyone, and welcome back to our discussion of Julius Caesar, Act 3, Scene 1. So we left off in our last discussion of Act 3, Scene 1 with the death of Caesar. So we're continuing in the same scene right after Caesar has fallen, and now we see that in addition to the conspirators who have already been there, we see that Antony, meaning Marc Antony, the loyal friend of Caesar, has now come back from running away when he initially hears of what's going on. And we are also going to see sort of this uneasy feeling between Brutus and Cassius and Antony about really what are Antony's true motives and can he be trusted? Soft. Who comes here? A friend of Antony's? Thus, Brutus, did my master bid me kneel. Thus did Marc Antony bid me fall down, and being prostrate, thus he bade me say, Brutus is noble, wise, valiant, and honest. Caesar was mighty, bold, royal, and loving. Say I love Brutus and I honor him. Say I feared Caesar, honored him, and loved him. If Brutus will vouchsafe that Antony may safely come to him and be resolved how Caesar hath deserved to lie in death, Marc Antony shall not love Caesar dead so well as Brutus living, but will follow the fortunes and affairs of noble Brutus through the hazards of this untrod state with all true faith. So says my master, Antony. Thy master is a wise and valiant Roman. I never thought him worse. Tell him, so please him come unto this place, he shall be satisfied and, by my honor, depart untouched. I'll fetch him presently. Exit. I know that we shall have him well to friend. I wish we may, but yet have I a mind that fears him much, and my misgiving still falls shrewdly to the purpose. Re-enter Antony. But here comes Antony. Welcome, Marc Antony. O mighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low? Are all thy conquests, glories, triumphs, spoils shrunk to this little measure? Fare thee well. I know not, gentlemen, what you intend. Who else must be let blood? Who else is rank? If I myself, there is no hour so fit as Caesar's death's hour, nor no instrument of half that worth as those your swords, made rich with the most noble blood of all this world. I do beseech ye, if you bear me hard, now, whilst your purpled hands do reek and smoke, fulfill your pleasure. Live 1,000 years, I shall not find myself so apt to die. No place will please me so, no mean of death, as here by Caesar, and by you cut off, the choice and master spirits of this age. O Antony, beg not your death of us, though now we must appear bloody and cruel, as by our hands and this our present act you see we do. Yet see you but our hands, and this the bleeding business they have done. Our hearts you see not, they are pitiful, and pity to the general wrong of Rome. As fire drives out fire, so pity, pity, hath done this deed on Caesar. For your part, to you our swords have leaden points, Marc Antony, our arms in strength of malice, and our hearts of brothers' temper do receive you in with all kind of love, good thoughts, and reverence. Your voice shall be as strong as any man's in the disposing of new dignities. Only be patient while we have appeased the multitude, beside themselves with fear, and then we will deliver you the cause why I, that did love Caesar when I struck him, have thus proceeded. I doubt not of your wisdom. Let each man render me his bloody hand. First, Marcus Brutus, I will shake with you. Next, Caius Cassius, do I take your hand. Now, Decius Brutus, yours. Now yours, Metellus. Yours, Cinna, and, my valiant Casca, yours. Though last, not least in love, yours, good Trebonius. Gentlemen all, alas, what shall I say? My credit now stands on such slippery ground that one of two bad ways you must conceit me, either a coward or a flatterer. That I did love thee, Caesar, oh, 'tis true. If then thy spirit look upon us now, shall it not grieve thee dearer than thy death to see thy Antony making peace, shaking the bloody fingers of thy foes, most noble, in the presence of thy corse? Had I as many eyes as thou hast wounds, weeping as fast as they stream forth thy blood, it would become me better than to close in terms of friendship with thine enemies. Pardon me, Julius. Here wast thou bade, brave heart. Here didst thou fall, and here thy hunters stand, signed in thy spoil, and crimsoned in thy lethe. O world, thou wast the forest to his heart, and this indeed, O world, the heart of thee. How like a deer, stricken by many princes, dost thou lie here. Marc Antony, pardon me, Caius Cassius. The enemies of Caesar shall say this. Then, in a friend, it is called modesty. I blame you not for praising Caesar so, but what compact mean you have with us? Will you be pricked in number of our friends, or shall we on, and not depend on you? Therefore I took your hands, but was indeed swayed from the point by looking down on Caesar. Friends am I with you all, and love you all, upon this hope, that you shall give me reasons why and wherein Caesar was dangerous. Or else were this a savage spectacle? Our reasons are so full of good regard that were you, Antony, the son of Caesar, you should be satisfied. That's all I seek, and am moreover suitor that I may produce his body to the marketplace and in the pulpit, as becomes a friend, speak in the order of his funeral. You shall, Marc Antony. Brutus, a word with you. Aside. You know not what you do. Do not consent that Antony speak in his funeral. Know you how much the people may be moved by that which he will utter? By your pardon. Aside to Cassius. I will myself into the pulpit first, and show the reason of our Caesar's death. What Antony shall speak, I will protest he speaks by leave and by permission, and that we are contented Caesar shall have all true rights and lawful ceremonies. It shall advantage more than do us wrong. Aside to Brutus. I know not what may fall, I like it not. Marc Antony, here, take you Caesar's body. You shall not in your funeral speech blame us, but speak all good you can devise of Caesar, and say you do it by our permission. Else shall you not have any hand at all about his funeral. And you shall speak in the same pulpit whereto I am going, after my speech is ended. Be it so. I do desire no more. Prepare the body then, and follow us. Exeunt all but Antony, who looks down at Caesar's body. O pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived in the tides of times. Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood. Over thy wounds do I prophesy, which, like dumb mouths, do open their ruby lips to beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of men. Domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all the parts of Italy. Blood and destruction shall be so in use, and dreadful objects so familiar, that mothers shall but smile when they behold their infants quartered with the hands of war, all pity choked with customs of fell deeds. And Caesar's spirit, ranging for revenge, with 80 by his side come hot from hell, shall in these confines with a monarch's voice cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war, that this foul deed shall smell above the earth, with carrion men groaning for burial. Enter Octavius' servant. You serve Octavius Caesar, do you not? I do, Marc Antony. Caesar did write for him to come to Rome. He did receive his letters and is coming, and bid me say to you by word of mouth, O Caesar! Thy heart is big. Get thee apart and weep. Passion, I see, is catching, for mine eyes, seeing those beads of sorrow stand in thine, began to water. Is thy master coming? He lies tonight within 7 leagues of Rome. Post back with speed, and tell him what hath chanced. Here is a mourning Rome, a dangerous Rome. No Rome of safety for Octavius yet. Hie hence and tell him so. Yet stay a while. Thou shalt not back till I have borne this course into the marketplace. There shall I try in my oration how the people take the cruel issue of these bloody men, according to the which thou shalt discourse to young Octavius of the state of things. Lend me your hand. Exeunt with Caesar's body. Turning then to the first part of today's reading, we see that rather than coming to the conspirators himself, Antony sends his servant, which is a pretty wise move, right? He is the best friend of Caesar, who they've just butchered on the floors of the Senate. And so he's rightfully concerned that he is next. And so he sends his servant to sort of pacify the conspirators, and Brutus in particular, saying that even though he viewed Caesar as mighty and bold and royal and all of these great things, that he also views Brutus as noble and wise and valiant. And hence why he will trust a promise or a vouchsafe from Brutus that if Antony comes to the Senate, no harm will befall him. And we see that Brutus readily gives in to this. So Antony is going to come to the Senate. They're going to speak about why Brutus and the conspirators have killed Caesar. And it's at this point, right, where we need to remember that the inner motivations of each character here matter very much, right? In particular, when we look at the words of Brutus, Cassius, and Antony. And we're going to look throughout the rest of this scene at who we believe is being honest, and what are the repercussions of what the conspirators have just done. So we see that Antony has re-entered, but before he comes, right, we see again that Brutus just shows this great display of honor, telling his servant to relay the information that he will depart from this place completely untouched. And Brutus, right, he says this from a place of confidence. Because remember how he views the people around him. He believes that people hold just as much honor as he himself does. Cassius, however, on the other hand, views people for what's going on the inside. What's their thought process like? And he's rightfully suspicious of Antony. Right? And he's the only one in this discussion who's going to bring up the fact that the words that are coming out of Antony's mouth can't necessarily be trusted. And we see that Antony re-enters, and from the very moment he steps into the Senate, it's as if none of the conspirators are around. And he turns straight to the body of Caesar and begins to speak to him as if Caesar is still alive, as if his corpse can somehow hear and comprehend the words that are coming out of Antony's mouth. And he immediately begins to mourn over the death of Caesar before turning to the conspirators finally and asking the question that's on everyone's mind, right? Who else needs to die in order for you to be satiated? And Antony continues with this idea of who else needs to die, and rightfully he immediately thinks of himself. And he goes on this long and beautiful speech to say that there is no better hour for me to die than Caesar's hour, right? Showing how much loyalty and love he has for him. And he even goes so far as to say there's no better person to kill me than the people who have so killed Caesar. And in so doing, he also, in a sense, flatters these conspirators. So at the same time, he's both mourning Caesar, but also saying things to get the conspirators to think that really Antony can come alongside of them and truly be their friend. And we see that Brutus is going to immediately just sort of take what Antony says at his word. Now, he believes everything that he says because remember, Brutus comes from a place of honor and nobility and honesty and believes everyone else around him also does the same. And so he explains to Antony that his grief that he's feeling, right, his fear and concern for his own life is coming from a place of not being able to understand why the conspirators have done what they have done. And he is about to explain to Antony the logic behind why he, who loved Caesar so much, would kill him. And here, Brutus is going to use a simile to drive this point home. And he says, as fire drives out fire, so pity, pity, hath done this deed on Caesar. Meaning that our sorrow for Rome was so great, so much greater than our sorrow for Caesar's death, that this is what drove us to do what we're doing. And this is what Brutus has been saying the whole time, right? It's not that he loves Caesar less, but that he loves Rome more. And he's trying to explain this rationale to Marc Antony. And he even continues to reassure Antony that he has no need to fear, relating himself and Antony and the rest of the conspirators as brothers who share love and good thoughts and respect for one another. And Cassius here is going to slip in and chime in his thoughts and sort of echo the same, right? Sort of telling to Antony that you will be as any other man here, right, in terms of who is given power in this new regime. And Brutus then will continue, and he promises to explain to Antony why they have killed Caesar, right? Remember, this is why Antony has come in the first place, right? To understand why they could do such a treasonous and wicked act. But he says first that they need to go calm the crowds, because remember, we saw in our last video on this scene that the members of the Senate who have not stuck behind to see what happened to Caesar have run out of the Senate hall and have told all of Rome what's just taken place. And so outside is complete and utter chaos. So with this information in mind, Antony seems to be agreeing, right? And he shows this sense of making peace through shaking the bloody hands of all of the conspirators there in turn. And this is a powerful image that I don't want anyone to overlook, okay? Imagine, right, the horror for anyone in witnessing a loved one who's died, and then while their blood is still warm on the ground, they have to then pretend to make peace and shake the hands of the people who have just killed that person. So Antony is in severe pain. And this is going to be important to understand in our next slide. So Antony is going to go around, he's going to shake the hands of all of these people, Trebonius last of all, and then he sort of makes this point, but not least in love. And remember, Trebonius is the one who took Antony away in the first place and sort of brought him away from being able to protect Caesar. And now Antony is going to go into this speech where really he lets loose in terms of his pain, and he holds nothing back. And he begins with this idea that from what I'm going to say, you're either going to think one of two horrible things about me. Either that I am a coward, right, because I have run away from this, because I'm making peace with the people who've murdered my friend, or that I'm a flatterer, that I'm saying all of these things that are good and lovely about you, and I don't really mean it. And so this is also, too, a cue for the reader to sort of begin processing those two scenarios. Do I think that Antony is a coward, giving in to the pressure of the conspirators, or do I believe that he's a secret flatterer? But interestingly, rather than continuing to speak to the conspirators, Antony goes straight back to speaking to Caesar's dead body, again, treating him as if he is still alive. And a lot of what's happening here and the things that he says come from a place of immense pain, so much so that he's blinded to the fact that the conspirators are still there. So you have to imagine him in sort of this fugue state where he's not sure where he is, when he is. Every time he looks back to the body of his mangled friend, right, all he can see is blood and pain and agony. And so he begins to say things that will not sound good to the conspirators, namely, right, that Caesar must be so grieved to see Antony making peace with the bloody fingers of your foes. And he continues, right? He lets loose on them. Remember, we need to imagine that Antony is just choking back tears at this point. And when he begins to continue to describe the conspirators and Caesar, he does so with a simile. So likening Caesar to this sort of poor deer who's unable to defend himself in the midst of these hunters who are spoiled in his blood. And we're going to see that Cassius, rightfully so, is not going to take kindly to this. And so Antony, sort of when he hears his name being spoken by Cassius, sort of comes back to reason. He regains control of himself, and he says that you should be able to understand where I'm coming from. Even enemies of Caesar had good things to say about him. How much more would a friend have to say? And so Cassius sort of agrees with him. Yeah, I see your point. I don't blame you for praising Caesar. My real question is, what side are you on? And this is the question, right, that all of us are having at this point, readers included, because we don't really know if Antony is being genuine or not. And so here Antony confirms that yes, that's why I shook your hands. I want to make a pact with you. It's just that I was so swayed by looking upon Caesar's dead body that I just simply lost reason. And now Brutus is going to take this reason and run with it. He completely agrees with where Antony's coming from. And he says that he's satisfied. And Antony, right, he begins to relax a bit. We can sort of visually see him sort of taking that sigh of relief, right? He was almost cornered by Cassius. And here he makes one request. He asks that he be allowed to present Caesar's body to the people and to have a proper funeral for him. And Brutus, immediately a man of honor, of course, agrees. But Cassius comes in. And he is the one who constantly sees through the deeds of others. And he gauges that this is not a good idea, right? We don't know, Cassius says, who the people are going to side with. There's no way that we should let Antony speak. And so here we need to remember that Brutus and Cassius are sort of having this argument off to the side in front of Antony, in front of the rest of the conspirators. So when they're talking about Antony, they're doing so privately. And so here Brutus is trying to sort of convince Cassius this is not a bad idea. I will go up to the pulpit or the stand first, and I will say why we killed Caesar, why he had to die, and that everything that is being said by Antony, we gave him permission to do. And here we see that Brutus again acts with honor. Right? Remember, we're talking about the tragic hero as part of Shakespearean tragedies throughout this play. And we see that although Brutus shows this great noble character of having honor, right, he also has this insane tragic flaw of not being able to see when certain things are going to come back, right, to bite him in the butt. Meaning that Cassius, who has shown that he can see through the deeds of men through the entire play, is essentially being ignored by Brutus, who doesn't know when someone is tricking him. And so, again, continuing to ignore Cassius's fears, Brutus turns back to Marc Antony and promises that he can say what he likes. However, it must all look good for the conspirators, meaning you won't say anything bad about us. In fact, you'll say good things about Caesar, and you'll say that you have our permission to do so, right? Essentially taking back this power and making themselves look good in the eye of the public. Antony obviously readily agrees to be able to get what he wants. Everyone leaves to go out to the people to begin to speak to them, and here Antony is finally left alone, right? So even though we still have the body of Caesar lying on the floor in front of him, we treat this as a soliloquy, right? Because he is the only living character on stage. And this soliloquy, you guys, should break your heart and fill you with the same anger that Antony feels. And we see that in the way that his tone just immediately shifts, and he reveals what he truly thinks about these men, right? Calling them butchers, right? Woe to them who have your blood, Caesar, just drenched on their hands. So we're not left in any sort of wondering about how Antony truly feels. And we know that the entire time he's simply been trying to flatter and trick the conspirators. And he's done so, at least for Brutus. And we hear the rest of this soliloquy, right? Antony begins by essentially saying, right, that I can barely utter, right, the rest of what's going to come out of my mouth. And he shifts to cursing Rome, right? Not just Rome, but all of Italy, and saying that because this has happened, right, fury and fierce civil strife, meaning war, will come to all of Italy. And he doesn't stop there, right? It's not just that Italy will be cursed. He begins to give vivid imagery about how they will be cursed. And the nastiest imagery that he uses is that of mothers who will have infants cut to pieces and ripped from their hands, right? That he says all pity will be choked with the customs of feldes, meaning no one will have honor, no one will feel sorry for one another. Even more than that, he predicts or prophesies that Caesar's spirit or ghost will come back from the dead, along with 80, the goddess of revenge, hot from hell, right? So you can imagine them sort of in this flaming chariot coming from the underworld to seek revenge on those who have killed him. And so here we also see this famous line of Antony's, where he just sort of shouts to the heavens, right? Cry havoc, meaning chaos, and let slip the dogs of war, meaning let all hell break loose in exchange for what these men have done to Caesar. And here the soliloquy ends, where we see the entering of Octavius's servant. And Octavius Caesar is the great nephew of Julius Caesar, and we find out now that he has been summoned by Caesar for some purpose, and obviously too by the surprise and shock of the servant that neither of them knows yet that Caesar has been murdered. And here is where Antony begins to speak to the servant. He trusts him, right, because he sees the tears in the servant's eyes that bring Antony's own eyes to water. And he makes a plan that this servant is going to stay with him and to see how the crowd reacts to the speech Antony is going to give. Because he rightfully states that Rome is dangerous right now and not safe for Octavius, because on the one hand, you have this just chaotic scene of mourning and people being confused and frightened, and you still have the conspirators, right, who are out to sort of end the rule of Caesar, right, which would extend to his great nephew as well. That is it for today's video. In our next video, we're going to be looking at Act 3, Scene 2. So I would like you to go ahead and read through that on your own before you watch the video, as I'm not going to go through the whole dramatic reading for the scene, because there are just some key points that I want to pick up on that I'll include in your final exam. So feel free to read at your own pace. I'll post the video tomorrow, so just make sure before you watch it in its entirety that you have gone through and read Act 3, Scene 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.